Joe Pesci isn't just a legend, he's the storm that changed Hollywood's weather. The spark behind performances that rattled theaters and stamped themselves into memory. He's fiery Joey LaMotta in Raging Bull, the volatile Tommy DeVito in Goodfellas, the unforgettable Harry in Home Alone, roles that turned a man of modest height into a giant of American film. From a barber's son in Newark and the hard edges of working-class New Jersey to the Oscar stage, he proved destiny can be hammered from pain, grit, and iron will. For decades, he commanded the frame with danger, wit, and ache, an energy you couldn't bottle. But that brilliance was paid for in flesh and feelings, ribs broken in the name of art, 3 marriages shattered, and a spirit drained by the repetition of the same kind of role. And now, in his final act, the storm still gathers. Let's walk through a life of triumph, loss, and unrelenting tempests. Before we begin, tap like to salute Joe Pesci, a man who gave everything to the craft. The first soundtrack of Joe Pesci's life wasn't applause. It was the staccato snip of scissors in a cramped Newark barbershop. Not soothing, but sobering. He was born on February 9, 1943, the only child of Angelo Pesci, a forklift driver who pulled late shifts bartending, and Maria, née Meche, a barber whose tired hands cut hair until they ached. Their family roots ran to Turin and the town of Aquilonia, but in America they were simply another immigrant household pressed into the narrow margins of Belleville, New Jersey. Rent hovered, meals were never guaranteed, and resilience was the only inheritance. Joe grew up where disinfectant and hair clippings replaced toy aisles, and the lines on his parents' faces said more than any lullaby. Life wasn't a gift. It was a grind. The stage arrived not by privilege, but by need. Maria, who recognized a spark, thought her son's energy might bring in a little and open doors she never reached. At 5, she took him into New York City to audition. A tiny kid, barely peeking over the stage edge, he carried a seriousness no child should. While others chased baseballs, Joe learned lines, small shoulders under costumes that smelled of dust and sweat. By 10, he was a regular on StarTime Kids, singing beside Connie Francis and other hopefuls. Childhood traded for studio lights. Years later, he'd admit, acting never felt like a choice. I had to do it. Behind the smile sat a harder truth. Innocence had been spent early. Opportunity wore the mask of obligation. Still, sparks flew even there. In those same streets, he befriended musicians Tommy DeVito and Bob Gaudio, friendships that helped kindle the Four Seasons. Decades later, when DeVito's luck went bad after leaving the band, Pesci didn't disappear. He quietly put his old friend on payroll and slipped him cameos in the 1990s. Tragic and tender at once. A working-class kid who never forgot his own as the boy from the barbershop became a restless young man. The stage that stole his childhood turned into the only shelter he knew, and still it resisted him. Pesci carried the familiar weight into adulthood, survival. As an only child, he bore his parents' hopes alone. Angelo drove by day and tended bar by night. Maria kept cutting. Joe tried carving his lane and, at times, picked up the scissors himself in a quiet shop with empty chairs, wondering if fate had already moved on, but the pull of music and performance never dimmed. In the 1960s, he played guitar in smoky clubs across New Jersey and New York, chasing a break that didn't come. The hours were punishing. Smoke, cheap whiskey, applause that evaporated by closing time. In 1968, he recorded Little Joe Sure Can Sing as Joe Ritchie, a set of pop covers meant to showcase his voice. No one heard it. The record vanished almost on arrival, leaving humiliation in its wake. He kept hustling. Teaming with Frank Vincent, he formed the comedy duo Vincent and Pesci from 1970 to 1976. They toured clubs and small theaters, their mix of slapstick and sharp insult filling rooms scented with stale beer and ash. They even reached Broadway in 1975 with the new Vaudevillians. A week later, it folded. Not just a closing, an indictment. By the mid-1970s, exhausted, Pesci nearly quit. Back in the Bronx, he worked at a Macy's restaurant, counting dollar tips and wiping tables, an exile in an apron for a man who'd faced cameras at 10. Friends say he was ready to surrender. Some nights he walked home with empty pockets and heavier questions, Had all the sacrifice been for nothing? Then came 1976, and a role so small no one expected it to matter, a micro-budget crime picture, The Death Collector. Pesci played a two-bit enforcer. He treated it like a final offering to a business that had given him nothing back. But the performance, tempered by real struggle, rang with authenticity. Robert De Niro and Martin Scorsese noticed. They didn't just see a character actor, they saw a storm. From dim clubs and forgotten records, Pesci stepped into blinding destiny. In Raging Bull, Scorsese placed him beside De Niro as Joey LaMotta, a brother caught between devotion and rage. He poured in every scar and every ounce of grit. He even cracked a rib in a brutal fight sequence, pain that would echo across years. The performance burned off the screen, earning him a BAFTA and an Academy Award nomination. Thunderous ovations for a kid who'd once stared at empty barber chairs. Yet even victory arrived with bruises. Nothing ever came without cost. Hollywood recognized his voltage and, just as quickly, tried to bottle it. He was pulled again into the orbit of gangland stories, Sergio Leone's Once Upon a Time in America among them. Visibility rose. The cage of typecasting tightened. The same qualities that made him essential were the bars that held him. Still, by decade's end, he was incandescent. Audiences adored him as fast-talking Leo Getz in Lethal Weapon, a comic whirlwind. Then came the knockout, Goodfellas. As Tommy DeVito, a few-short mobster, he delivered terror and electricity in equal measure. The funny how exchange wasn't pulled from thin air. It came from Pesci's memory of a real, nearly catastrophic run-in with a mobster when he was young. Live danger transformed into art. The Academy named him Best Supporting Actor. On stage, he gave just 5 words, "It's my privilege." Thank you, no flourish. Just the humility of a man who knew what it took to get there. But triumph shadowed him. Goodfellas left him wrung out. The improv chaos bled him dry. Offers grew repetitive, more gangsters, more hair-trigger men. He loved making movies, he'd say, but only when the role was worth it. Ironically, freedom found him in comedy. In Home Alone, as Harry, the hapless burglar outfoxed by a kid, he could have coasted. Instead, his grumbly mutters and world-class pratfalls made him a holiday fixture. Even that came with injury. In one infamous gag, he grabbed a scorching doorknob and burned his hand for real. The early 1990s showcased his full range. In Oliver Stone's JFK, he was spectral and strange. In My Cousin Vinny, he spun courtroom farce into charm and precision. Critics praised him in the public eye, even if ticket buyers missed it. Whether the world watched or not, he delivered. By 1995, he reunited with Scorsese and De Niro in Casino as Nicky Santoro, a performance as volcanic as anything he'd done. The price was brutal. He rebroke the same rib he'd shattered on Raging Bull 15 years later, as if his bones kept the ledger. Some days, after savage scenes, he retreated to his trailer, silent and aching, reminded that excellence exacts a toll, and then came the humbling. The late 1990s brought acclaim, but also misfires. Gone Fishing, 8 heads in a duffel bag. Proof that even an Oscar winner can stumble in a business without mercy. Fame dazzles like glass, and shatters as easily. By decade's end, he stood at a crossroads again. He'd climbed from a barber shop to the mountaintop, but the climb had scarred him. Broken bones, sleepless nights, the suffocation of typecasting. His victories were blinding, his battles brutal. Out of that paradox, glory knotted with pain, Joe Pesci's legend hardened. Not just an actor, a survivor of Hollywood's worst tests. A man who turned wounds into work you can't forget. As the 1990s closed, Pesci was on a summit most never touch. Raging Bull, Goodfellas, Home Alone, Casino, the Oscar on the shelf, the legacy in flames. Then he did the unthinkable. He walked away. Not out of weakness, but sorrow. The town that once prized his power now pushed cookie-cutter scripts. Another Tommy, another snarling, heavy, empty copies of the original. After the public drubbings of Gone Fishing and 8 heads in a duffel bag, the insult cut deeper. He'd bled for the work. He wouldn't parody himself. In 1999, at the height of fame, he announced his retirement. No fireworks, just a quiet exit. He returned to his first love, music. That year, he released Vincent LaGuardia Gambini Sings Just For You, inspired by his comic turn in My Cousin Vinny, complete with the cheeky rap Wise Guy. Critics blinked. Pesci exhaled. In a studio, alone with a mic, he was free. No cages, no casting, no machinery. For the first time in decades, he sang for himself. That image, Pesci crooning to an empty room, may be the truest picture of his farewell. Not absence, but self-respect. He didn't vanish entirely. He resurfaced for loyalty and art. Small projects with old friends, a winking commercial, a quick reminder that the flame was still there. But nothing sustained. And Hollywood had one more insult waiting. On a John Gotti project, Pesci reportedly packed on 30 LABs to reshape himself. Then producers slashed his role and pay. He sued for $3 million. It settled. The bruise lingered. Even legends get handled, roughly. Fate and friendship had one last appointment. Years later, Scorsese and De Niro kept calling about The Irishman. Pesci said no, more than 40 times.